I don't know what I don't know what people's problem is. Like, here's one thing you can bet, is that if you've got something to say, so will I. So will I. And I will do this. And again, people say, oh, that's mean, you shouldn't say that. That's why I say it.
I bet. Let's talk about the Roach King. I love that he doesn't shower. You make me want to go to the gym. Something tells me you can't hurt me there. How's it going, everybody? My name is Suris, and if you're unfamiliar with me or my content, I try to provide a fair bit of political analysis while trying to make sure that politics isn't that miserable to engage with. So if that's your jam, then please consider subscribing and tell a couple friends what I'm doing over here. That said, today we are talking about Asmongold, who's a non-political streamer that has been giving us a lot of his opinions about politics over the last year. Now, I initially came across Asmon's content years ago when he was doing World of Warcraft Classic stuff, and basically solidified my opinion that I did not care for the content. Now, that doesn't mean that the content was bad or not, that just means it wasn't really my style. But here lately, I've been seeing him talk a lot of shit about not only loving bombing people, irrespective of whether or not they deserve it, but also really, really disliking trans people. And, you know, it's one of those things where he'll say, it's not that I don't like trans people, it's that they keep throwing it in my face. You know, those kinds of people, when throwing it in your face is basically just existing. But I'm specifically talking about his issues with trans people because there's a friend of mine who he likes to go after a lot, Nyara. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Nyara, she is a trans femme VTuber that talks about politics and plays Valorant over on Twitch. I've done a couple videos with her before, and honestly, I think she's a pretty decent person, if not a little provocative more often than not. And one of her main focuses has been about advocacy for trans rights. And this has led her to go under a lot of criticism and a lot of scrutiny by the likes of Asmongold, Tectone, and others. Now, a lot of their problems with Niara seem to focus on her advocacy for trans kids. For those who don't know, we've actually got a decent bit of research that shows that people find out they are trans as early as age 5 and 6. I'll have a study in the description from the NIH that actually goes into this, but the basic idea is that people figure out that something may not be exactly right with the gender they were assigned at birth very, very early in childhood, and usually this goes untreated or unknown for several years because of a lot of societal circumstances. We tend to have very strong opinions about children and consent, and it's right that we have these opinions. The nuance that you have to get into, however, is around the time that kids start figuring this shit out. This is one of the reasons why in professional settings, when we're talking about trans kids, we usually end up having a timeline of figuring out, hey, do you think your gender does or does not assign or align with what you were assigned at birth? If not, then let's socially transition you for a bit to see how you feel. This is where a kid might go by a different name or wear a different kind of clothing for a few years. We don't start talking about hormones or puberty blockers or anything until a child has at least reached puberty, but this is the nuance that Asmongold tends to not think of. He doesn't look at any of the studies about puberty blockers and when and why we administer them. He just creates a narrative where Niara talks about trans kids, what kind of person is obsessed with children, and then you end up effectively arguing that Niara is a pedophile as a result of that. Now, there's plenty of ways to argue that this is some kind of defamation or libel if it's written on Twitter, but for Asmon, this has all seemed to be just a giant joke.
Thank God. Hopefully it happens more. So now you're crying about me making, or my editors, I don't deal with the Clips channel at all. My editors making a video about you being a fucking weirdo. That's too bad. Well, that's what you get. You shouldn't have been tweeting about me making shit up. Shouldn't have done it. You didn't want this to happen. You shouldn't have done it. I don't know what people's problem is. Like, here's one thing you can bet, is that if you've got something to say, so will I. So will I. And I will do this. And again, people say, oh, that's mean, you shouldn't say that. That's why I say it.
So for him, it's about the cruelty. When he says it works, he means that it gets him attention. He means that it gets him clicks. To him, Twitch is a game, and the numbers are the goal. When he engages in performative cruelty, he gets the numbers, he gets to win. He doesn't see any damage he causes. He doesn't see any greater societal impacts. He doesn't see any of that. He's willfully unaware of that stuff. It's also weird to me trying to say that, oh, well, I don't actually have any control over the Asmongold clip channel. I don't do anything with that. My editors do. Yeah, but you pay the editors. You're in charge of the editors. If something goes wrong on one of my videos, KFox may be my editor, but it's still going to end up coming back to me, and I'll do things like offer corrections in the comment section or offer a correction to a thumbnail title or something like that if I feel like something goes amiss. Now, generally, that doesn't happen very often, but over the course of my time with various editors, it's happened a handful of times, and I've done stuff to correct it when it happens. After all, when you are in charge of somebody, the buck does eventually stop somewhere, and it usually stops at you. There's also this bit in here about how if you have something to say about him, he'll just clap back, and that's fair on like a playground, but when we're actually talking about people with opinions that are rooted in reality, then your usual clapback needs to be, oh, I read the material and found out you're wrong because of X, Y, or Z. Asmon, on the other hand, tends to tell people they're wrong because he has this weird idea that he's always correct, and while Asmon is okay at explaining concepts at a layman level for people who might not be able to understand them, he also isn't very good at understanding concepts himself, but he is very overconfident in his ability to understand them.
Really, really bad. Illegal immigration isn't as big of an issue as the media makes it out to be, if anything. And if anything, it helps so much. Don't believe me, I can send you a link of a very good video with zero bullshit, good arguments, and sources. I don't need to look at a study to realize that having a bunch of uneducated people that don't speak my language coming into my country to do, in most cases, almost all cases, completely fucking unskilled labor.
There's a lot to get into in this clip, but there's two claims here that I want to look into first. The one about not needing to use studies because it doesn't matter, anybody can fabricate anything in a study. I don't really think that that kind of point holds true, and he's going to elaborate on that point more in a further part of the video, but I want to just say this real quick. Whenever a study is done, we get the opportunity to peer review it. By we, I mean people who care about science, and it's not really me because I'm not a scientist. I'm a random guy hiding behind a cartoon in a video. But when studies are peer-reviewed, that is a way to figure out if the study is horseradish or not. For Asmongold, he lives in a world where all studies can be considered horseradish and only his opinion matters, because what he's personally observed, even if he doesn't walk outside of his house to observe anything, what he's personally observed is all that truly matters. It's a childish and honestly pathetic way to look at the world. When presented with evidence to the contrary on things, you just put your fingers in your ears and scream, nuh-uh. The second part I want to get into here is his claim about unskilled labor. He forms his anti-immigration biases based on the idea that people who immigrate to the United States are performing unskilled labor to begin with. But I want to quote the Natural Fund for Workforce Solutions in that there is no such thing as a low-skilled worker. Every job, no matter what it is, requires a unique set of skills and knowledge. There's no such thing as a low skill or unskilled worker. Even if a skill is easy to learn and monotonous, it can still take years to master or gain speed or just anything. Like, look at the difference between a player that understands everything about a game like, say, RuneScape, and then look at a player who is playing it at a professional level. Like, it may not seem like a skill to be able to navigate your inventory and click with perfect precision at all times, but I promise you, if you tried running around and doing this in the same game, you wouldn't have anywhere near the click precision. But you could also argue that this isn't a skill and it isn't useful in any way, shape, or form, but it's still a very important thing for people who play that game. If I can get better at something over time, it's a skill, period. And when it comes to work, yeah, you can diss people for being in what people generally consider unskilled labor, but would you want to do the job? Do you want to go there and do that work? If not, then shut the fuck up, it's still labor. So if all work is, either labor or skilled or some combination of both, Asmon's just wrong here.
I don't need a study to tell me that I'm wrong about that.
I mean, obviously you do, because if you're wrong, then something has to be able to convince you, right?
It's obvious that that's bad. People constantly going, but if you look at this study shows, this study in a lot of cases, by the way, a lot of these studies that they do are deliberately misleading.
Then if that's the case, perhaps you could look at the study and show us where it's deliberately misleading. Like, it's very easy to say a nothing statement like, this study is wrong, or this study is deliberately misleading, but if you're not willing to actually go into the why or the how, you know, engage in the peer review process, which is part of science, then I feel like you shouldn't have a leg to stand on. But Asmongold's viewers still really love listening to him wax lyrical about things he obviously doesn't know anything about.
They are deliberately misleading, and they create false narratives based off of the way the data is collected.
Some would say it's also misleading and creates false narratives to say that studies can be faked, manipulated, or otherwise, and never actually offer anything to the contrary of an actual study, just simply saying that that's the case and moving on, which then creates the standard for your entire audience to do the same. I once had a friend like Asmongold who had this same thought process. Whenever we would play D&D or Magic the Gathering, this friend would get really, really upset if he said something short, quippy, and wrong, and we challenged him on it, asked him to back it up, started talking about data that showed that he was incorrect about something. One day, he had a drunken breakdown and literally yelled at us and said, "Can you guys just let me be wrong?" And the answer is no. Because the longer you keep that shit up, the more you're going to end up giving that wrong information to your fucking kids, my guy. But it's really sad to see Asmon doing this as a person with a platform and not just a random person I played D&D with, because I see a lot of people echo the things he says. Again, an interesting claim that he will not back up. Because you would need to not only show that a study doesn't look at a second-order effect, which could be pretty easy to do, it's an unintended consequence, it makes sense, but you would then need to prove that that second-order effect happens, and guess how you would do this, Asmon? You would perform your own study. Weird. And then that study would be up for peer review, where people could show if you were correct or incorrect. But I know you're not going to do that, just like I'm not going to do that. Our careers are not writing studies. Our careers are talking to randos on the internet. But I wanted to show that clip to show you the standard for evidence that Asmongold usually uses. Now, there was another clip I wanted to use here where he literally said he doesn't have to do research because he's always right, but I could not find that clip in time for editing this video, so instead, I'm just going to use a different clip where he claimed very much the same thing. And now that that's already done, let's get back to his beef with Nyara.
About reputation destruction, you're a piece of shit who spreads transphobia, normalizes far-right propaganda, and you deserve to not just be called out, but face real-world consequences for the hate you're spreading. I wonder what this means. I wonder how you would feel if I said to my audience that you should face real-world consequences, because that would be an incitement to violence, and you know it is.
Just for context, this is the same person we dealt in the past, now going full mask off.
If minors can't consent to HRT, then they can't consent to puberty.
If they can't consent to HRT, how do you justify forcing them through puberty? For some reason, HRT is something irreversible, life ruination or whatnot, and puberty is like this wholly natural thing.
Just to be absolutely clear, we are not talking about psychological counseling. We are not talking about puberty blockers. We are talking about hormone replacement therapy to children.
That's weird. I don't remember her actually saying the words in the way that you're describing them. I wonder if you might be lying. I wonder if I could just call Nyara real quick and see what she thinks. Okay, so, Nyara, real quick, just in your own words, let's say a parent finds out their kid is trans. What do you do? What's the steps there? Because according to Asmongold, you think it's just immediately grabbing the injector and giving them the titty skittles.
Yeah, so if you have a child that is questioning their gender identity, you obviously go to therapy. You work with someone who is knowledgeable in the field. You also work with pediatricians, endocrinologists, and so on to figure everything out. And if the child is consistent in their gender identity, mismatching their biological sex, you can start with social transitioning, which is changing their name, referring to them with different pronouns. You can use puberty blockers to assist with that and give a child time. And then after a couple of years, you go on HRT or either resume your natural puberty. And obviously, when it comes to surgery, then you have to be over the age of 18, as recommended by most medical organizations that I am aware of.
Okay, so basically you're saying that if a kid is found to potentially be trans, we put them through therapy. If through therapy and professional examination, they find that they still want to go through transitioning, you socially transition them first. And that's not giving them hormones. And then if after they hit puberty, they still want to transition, then you give them puberty blockers for a few years, which is also not injecting them with the titty skittles. And then after not injecting them with the titty skittles, after several years, then they potentially go through hormone therapy, and even things like surgeries are usually postponed for a few years even after that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Glad to know that Asmongold lied again.
Many such cases.
I want to say thank you to Nyara for participating in the video, and maybe go check out her channel. After all, she is pseudo the subject of the video.
That's right. Stop fucking with kids. Stop trying to, gender confuse children. I'm not talking about 17. We're talking about 7. If you were like, Nyara has said that children can't consent to puberty. No reasonable, normal person spends this much time trying to, basically communicate and advocate for kids to be confused about their gender. This is a mental illness.
This is one of those things that I find to be really weird. Like, it's pretty natural for people to want to defend children, and it's also very natural for people who see that other kids may be going through a terrible situation that could have been prevented so long as people paid attention to their needs and their plights. It's normal for people to want to intervene with that. And one of the reasons that Niara pushes the trans kids thing as much as she does is, well, technically, she doesn't. If you've ever actually watched a stream from Niara, she doesn't talk about this that much. It's just a thing that tends to get overblown on Twitter. This is one of those things where maybe 0.0001% of any random Niara stream actually brings up this subject. And when you're talking about trans people, the age that people find that they are trans is a pretty natural thing to talk about, but she doesn't really talk about this that much. In fact, if you look at her channel, at her clips, a lot of it is her just memeing on people and confusing them in Valorant with her voice. Or getting into arguments with people about trains and why America doesn't have enough of them. My God, she's autistic. But what happens is people like Asmongold amplify the kids thing because they don't look at enough of her content to actually get a good idea of a holistic idea of who she is and what she is. They find the stuff that's going to go viral, they prey on it, and then they make a bunch of videos, and their Clips channel make a bunch of videos about that specifically because it gets clicks, it gets people angry, it gets people engaged. I promise you that the amount that she talks about the trans kids thing would be lowered even more if y'all didn't give so much pushback and were fucking wrong. Again, I have linked to the study in the description about when people even find this stuff out in the first place.
It's because I think on some very, very base level, they know their days are numbered. That's right. The days of going out, advocating for violence, trying to gender confuse children, trying to push lies onto the world, your days are numbered. And eventually, people will actually come in that will weaponize the FBI to go after online threats, to go after people that are trying to communicate with minors and discuss gender transitions with them. And that's going to happen. It's going to happen. I guarantee it. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do everything that I can to make it happen faster.
Weird, I don't remember somebody advocating for violence, and when you say that you think somebody should get real-world consequences happening to them, one lens to look through it is the idea that you're trying to push violence, like stochastic terrorism-wise, onto somebody. Another way to look at it is they want you to be banned off of Twitch. They want you to be taken off Twitter. Those are real-world consequences for your actions. Also, remember, Nyara's in Germany, and there are actually laws about hate speech there, so there are even real-world consequences that are normalized where she lives that are not normalized here because we don't have those same protections here in the States. Also weird to me watching Asmon wax lyrical hard about changing the world so that people will no longer be able to advocate for kids' rights. In his mind, there's some weird dude sitting with a trench coat going, "Hey kids, you want some hormone therapy? Hey kids, you want some?"
Oh my God, nobody asked you. Get out of my fucking office!
You know, sometimes I feel like it just does it to egg me on. And I still don't know the gender of that thing. And I don't plan on finding out.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting clipped out of context too, guaranteed. Absolutely. I don't need to edit down Nyara's words. He wants to push HRT to pubescent kids openly. What is this here? Let me see if I can pull it up here.
To suffer. What if they regret their natural puberty? If they can't consent to HRT, if they can't decide which...
Yeah, your days are numbered. The weird, like this weird shit where you're trying to get involved with kids. Yeah, this is not going to last. By the way, this is like a 90-10 issue where 90% of people agree with me. I understand that inside of some enclaves of mentally ill, retards on Reddit, they think this is normal. This is not normal at all. This is insane.
Weird, because again, I have Nyara's own words saying that that's not what she wants, but everybody seems to be misunderstanding that, and I wonder if there's maybe a group of React streamers who are possibly maybe a little responsible for that misunderstanding. I also like the use of a bunch of fallacies here from Asmon. Number one is the appeal to numbers fallacy. 90% of people agree with me on a thing. Okay, that doesn't mean that you're right. Also, the ad hominem about the r-slur Redditors specifically, saying that they're the only ones who actually say that what Nyara's actually saying is normal, when, again, this is actually what is supported by science. I'm going to be providing another study about trans care and puberty blockers in the description below, but suffice to say that it says what I've already said in much fewer words here. Puberty blockers are administered shortly after people experience the first signs of puberty. They are safe to take for about 2 to 5 years. After that 2 to 5 years, that's when conversations about hormone therapy are actually discussed. That's what Nyara says. That's what Nyara believes. That's what I say. That's what I believe. That's what the science on this says, and that's what is peer-reviewed to be true. Asmongold will do anything in his power to convince you that studies should not be looked at, that the only source of information that you should care about is him. It's what gets him his clicks, it's what gets him his money, it's what makes him seem credible to his audience. But anybody that actually looks into what he's saying and actually does any amount of research finds that he's wrong about not only this, but about a lot of things. He's wrong about war, he's wrong about immigration, he's wrong about trans people, but it makes him a lot of money and it gets him a lot of clicks to just get angry about that stuff on the internet and then point fingers at people who become vulnerable and victimized because of his own words. This is a person who once was just a World of Warcraft streamer that dabbled in Path of Exile and a bunch of other games that technically had the respect of a lot of his peers because he was just a really interesting gamer for some people. And now he's devolved into a political ranter who can't get basic things right because his views on studies are, as I quote,
I don't need a study to tell me that I'm wrong about that.
There's not really a whole lot more to be gleaned out of this because we kind of understand what the pattern's going to be here. He's going to say something that his audience is going to just take whole cloth. Even when a handful of people in his audience try to show him that he's wrong on something, he'll just dismiss that and say that, oh, well, studies can be manipulated, so I won't listen to anybody showing me data of any kind. It's a very sad, uninformed existence where one never has the opportunity for growth. And I think that's probably the worst part about this whole ordeal with Asmongold. It's not just that he peddles lies on the internet. It's not just that he says things that are offensive. It's that when presented with evidence to the contrary of his opinions, he chooses the veracity of his opinions more than the veracity of data. There's a word for this, and, well, technically there's 2 words for this. 1 word and 1 term. The word is anti-intellectualism. Anti-intellectualism can commonly be expressed as questioning the value or relevance of intellectual pursuits like education, philosophy, and, well, damn near anything that would require expertise. Anti-intellectualists will usually present themselves as champions of the common folk, the voice of the everyman, and that's actually something that I've seen from Asmon's own audience whenever they come into my comment section. They say, oh, he's the voice of the average American, he's the everyman. It's just populism, that's all it is. If you've never read the book The Death of Expertise, don't. It's kind of boring. I got through Conquest of Red, but I wasn't able to get through this one. But there is a quote from that book I want to read to you as if I've read the entire thing, and it's that, no, the bigger problem is that we are proud of not knowing things. Americans have reached a point where ignorance, especially of anything related to public policy, is an actual virtue. To reject the advice of experts is to assert autonomy. A way for Americans to insulate their increasingly fragile egos from ever being told they're wrong about anything. And that's kind of what I want to leave you with here, because that's the vibe I get from damn near everything Asmongold does. Not just the way he responds to Nyara, because originally I wanted to make this video just as a defense of her, because she's my friend, but the greater thing to look at for me is how he pushes anti-intellectualism, how he pushes the concepts that are talked about in The Death of Expertise, how a world that Asmongold envisions is a world that is reactionary, favors action for action's sake, glorifies false machismo, and man, we have a handful of words for that. Now, I don't think that Asmongold is a fascist. I think that that's a very silly thing to say, but he is a guy who roots on fascists, and we might have a few different words for that. But he does push this fear of difference. He does push this appeal to false social frustrations. He does push an obsession with a plot, specifically with people about Nyara. He's doing a lot of the same stuff here. Again, I want to reiterate, I do not think Asmongold's a fascist, not in any conceivable way. I just think that he pushes harm, and I think that the way he pushes that harm is by pushing you not to get smarter. Asmongold gets better as more of you are dumber. His world is better when you are not educated. His opinions have more salience when you do not have the intellectual rigor to push back on that. I appreciate members of his audience that have tried to push back on him, that have tried to show him studies that show that he's wrong, that have tried to be that voice of reason in an otherwise black echo chamber. I want to end this video with a call to action. Read. I'm dead serious. Go read some books. I have some suggestions for you that I think you'll like, a couple that I actually have read all the way through that I think you'll find very, very helpful. The first one I want to suggest has nothing to do about politics at all. It's How to Talk to Anyone, 92 Little Tricks for Big Success in Relationships. And I'm showing you this on Audible to show that I actually did read this one all the way through. But this one basically just tells you how to talk to people when you haven't done so before. I feel like a lot of us who find ourselves isolated, watching streamers, not making friends outside of, our own four walls, I feel like a lot of us would have better lives and be more fulfilled if we went out and talked with people and made friends out in the real world. And honestly, this book gives you a lot of tools on how to do that. I do want to recommend Death of Expertise, but again, I wasn't able to get through all of it. I don't know why it's only showing me that I could listen now, but it's not showing me how long I got into the novel. That one's weird. This one's also weird because I know that I've read through this one, but I guess it's not showing me that on Audible. That's weird. This program's strange. Anyway, I'd also suggest Manufacturing Consent. It's a very, very good book by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman that goes into the ways that the United States normalizes basic concepts in order to let you do things like support wars that maybe you otherwise wouldn't advocate for, or, shows you that you could be against immigrants or trans people when you otherwise wouldn't care about what they do in their lives. It's about how media manipulates people, and it's a very good read, even if Audible's pretending that I've only read like an hour of it. That one's strange. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking it out to the end. If you like what I'm doing over here, subscribe, tell a few friends about what I'm doing here, and check out my Patreon where I go into behind the scenes about what's going on with the channel. And you know what? We're in the holiday season, so if you haven't already, hug a loved one, honestly. For me, once I get done recording this, I'm going to the gym, and I'm going to go have some food with a friend. That's my plan. What's yours? Let me know in the comments section below. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.